So before you can proceed with your Skittles inquiry, you first have to do some initial observations of Skittles. So we'll take a look over here. So I've already placed 5 Skittles, one of each color, into a petri dish, and I have some water handy. So what we're going to do is take some initial observations before we fill out our paper. So we could describe that the Skittles are shiny, that there's one of each color, there's an S recorded on the surface of each Skittle, and so on. After we've done that, we're going to take some water and pour it into the petri dish. And now we're just going to wait. I'll just move that back. We're just going to wait and make some observations. You should probably have yours evenly spaced. I poured the water a little too vigorously. But then we just wait and wait, and you can start to see now that there's some color bleeding off of the Skittles. So the red and the purple, the orange, the yellow, the green are all creeping across. Some of them seem to be moving faster than others, so that's something you could observe. The red and the orange and the yellow seem to be making greater progress than the purple and the green. I don't know if that's important. Okay, so you can see now that the purple and the yellow, the colors have touched. But notice what's not happening. The colors aren't crossing. So we'll keep waiting and waiting some more until all of the colors have merged together. And you can see that the colors are disappearing off of the surface of the Skittles. Now, if I had added enough water to completely cover the Skittles, one other thing that would happen would be the letter S would lift off the surface and would actually start floating around. So the S does not dissolve. The color dissolves, but the S doesn't. Okay, so now they're touched. It's taken about 2 minutes for all those colors to transfer together. So now that you've done that, you can start wondering some things. So in class, we wondered, okay, so why is this happening? And what are some tests that we could do? So we came up with a list of possible independent variables. So we could decide to change the temperature of the water and see if that makes an impact. Or we could change the liquid that we're putting the Skittles in and see if that has an impact. And we could change the volume of liquid or the number of Skittles that we use and so on. So there's lots of things that you could change. You're going to pick one of those things to change. And then you're going to figure out how you're going to measure whether the change you're making is having an impact. So that's what the independent variable. So imagine that I decide what is the impact of raising the water temperature on how quickly the Skittle color dissolves. Oh, you can see that the S on the purple one is floating on the surface there. So that would happen with all of them. Okay, so you'll write your focus question. So you're gonna write something like, what happens when you raise the temperature of the water to how quickly the colors dissolved? Now the independent variable is the thing you're going to change. So remember, you need to change it 5 times. So if you pick temperature, you need to find 5 temperatures of water to change. Or if you type of liquid, you might want to use water and vinegar, apple juice, anything you have around your house. You could change the type of Skittle. Some students did that, so they tried sour Skittles and the regular Skittles and the berry Skittles and the bright side Skittles and so on, or even the type of candy. So you could use M&Ms and Smarties too, anything that has a candy coating. So you're going to decide what you're going to change. Then you're going to decide how you'll measure the change. So for this one, the easiest thing to measure would be how long it takes for the color to get to the edge, so all the colors to touch would be one thing that you could measure. Or you could measure or wait for how long it takes for all the color to come off each of the Skittles will be another one. Okay, so then your control variables is everything else. So you should always use the same volume of liquid if you're changing the temperature, the same number of Skittles, the same color of Skittles. Everything else has to be the same between each trial, so that you can be sure that your independent variable is the one that is causing the change in time. And then a hypothesis. Why do you think that will happen? So if I'm picking temperature, why do I think that heating up the water is going to make the color dissolve more? So you could use the particle theory of matter to explain that one. Okay, and then if you go to background information, we did a little bit of background information in class. So we looked at the ingredients. We learned that the colors that are on Skittles are water soluble. We also know that sugars dissolve in water, so Skittles will dissolve. But Skittles are covered in carnauba wax, which makes them shiny and also makes them not dissolve the coating in your hands. Your hands don't turn red or yellow or the rainbow every time you pick up Skittles to eat them. So there is some wax on the outside. So that might explain why the colors don't cross, because the wax isn't soluble. Okay, so then you're going to write a list of the materials. So how many Skittles, what kind of measuring cups or devices you used, and so on. Then you're going to write a procedure, so a detailed summary of your experiment. So step 1, you did this, and so on. Write it like you would write a recipe, so somebody else could follow it along. Then this is where you're going to write your observations. So remember, qualitative observations are what you see, smell, hear, etc. And quantitative is numbers. So that will be the time it takes for your colors to touch or whatever you're doing. And your trial will be like boiling water, hot water, warm water, cold water, room temperature water, whatever you pick, if you're picking that. And then analysis. So once you've written all your observations, describe what happened, what you learned through the experiment, which trials were most impacted. So which one did it happen fastest, which one happened slowest, and why do you think that happened? So explain that. And then finally, for the conclusion, you're going to evaluate your hypothesis. So you're going to take a look, was your hypothesis supported by the results? Explain what you learned about the independent variable and how it affects the dependent variable. And then finally, your evaluation, describe any possible sources of error and offer suggestions for improvement. So you might have thought you did your experiment perfectly, which is fine, maybe you did, but what were some possible sources of error? Maybe if you were changing the temperature, you didn't quite get to the right temperature. Maybe you forgot to rinse out your container and you had vinegar still left in your container and then you added water, so that would impact, and so on. And then if you did any research and listed any resources, you can write that down in your works cited. So I hope that helps you understand how to finish the Skittles report.